we will do a quick round of those who are at the table here, but I won't go through the list of everybody who's on the screen. But Sally, you can pick all those up for the minutes, can't you? So if we quickly say who we are, because we have a couple of people who've been, I don't think have been here before. Simon, I don't think you've been here before. Lucy, I don't think you've been here before. So, Alan Billings, Police and Crime Commissioner.
Steve Wright, Chair of the Joint and Independent Audit Committee.
Michael Lewis, Chair of the Independent Ethics Committee, panel.
Lucy Garside, I'm the Staff Officer to Mr Forber.
Lindsay Butterfield, temporary OCC.
Tim Fulham, Deputy Chief Constable.
And Dr Blank, I'm the Assistant Chief Officer for Resources.
Afternoon, Simon Morris, Chief Superintendent and the District Commander of Arms.
Afternoon, Alison Fletcher, Office Manager in the Senior Council.
Sally Parkin, Governance and Compliance Manager for the OPCC.
Good afternoon, Ian Bailey. I'm the Barnsley Council and South Yorkshire Violence Reduction Unit Partnership Manager.
And Michelle Buttery, OPCC's Chief Executive.
Thank you very much, everybody, and you're all very welcome. And Simon, I think this may be the first time that you've been certainly as District Commander, but I'm not sure you've been before, so okay, doubly welcome.
Thank you very much.
We are being filmed, of course, and the film will then be uploaded on the website and will be available for public view. I think we're also being live streamed, Sally?
Yep.
So the public are peering in, even at this moment, and the media, of course, are present as well, just to remind you of that. Item 3, are there any announcements? Are there any public questions?
No.
Any urgent items? Items to be considered in the absence of the public and press. I don't think we have any. We're doing pretty well here. Item 7 is declarations of interest. Are there any that we need to know about from today's meeting? Okay. So item 8 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of November. They have been circulated. Can I take it that they're a true and correct record unless somebody wants to say something? Okay, thank you very much. And matters arising from those, or actions arising from those minutes, which is on page 15. And Michelle.
Yes, I'll just mention the 4, Commissioner, that have not been closed. So the first one relates to you having sight of the new child exploitation awareness campaign. Carrie, head of corporate comms in the force, is going to do that. The next, I don't know whether there's an update on that. We haven't heard anything from Carrie, so I take it it's not ready as yet.
Send that through to Sam.
Possible awareness campaign around illegal vapes be considered again by the corporate comms team. That's gone to Sam. Deb Mahmood to establish if there's any victim support for victims of stalking online specifically.
Perhaps I can just deal with that by way of verbal update, Commissioner. So there's a variety of different support mechanisms available through a number of different charities. Paladin, the National Stalking Helpline, the Susie Lampley Trust being just 3 of them. But there is a comprehensive range of agencies that provide support in those circumstances that we work proactively with.
That's 2. And then finally, after the last discussion last time, you asked for a report on how Integrated Offender Management, IOM, is managed by the force, the IOM outcome rate, and whether there's any concerns and if they can be brought to a future meeting. So we just need to put that on the work programme when the force is ready. February.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Sally.
So I think we can discharge them all then. Thank you very much for that. We come to force performance, and the Chief Constable, Lauren, is on the line rather than in the room. She is remote. Well, she's not remote. She's virtual. She's virtual. She's real, but she is also remote and virtual.
Agile.
She's agile. I don't know whether you can hear us, Lauren.
I can hear you, yes, I am both virtual and remote thing.
Thanks very much. Just checking, and we can hear you, so that's good. Thank you very much. We come to the Barnsley District Summary Update then, which is item 10, pages 17 to 30. And Simon, what we do is we don't go. We assume everybody's read the report, and then I pick out 1 or 2 things that have just struck me as being issues of interest, and ask you to comment on them. And then at the end, if there's something you want to pick up that we haven't dealt with, and you feel that you'd like to make a comment on, we invite you to do that. You don't have to do that, but you're very welcome to do it.
Thank you.
So if we turn to the report then, which is item 10, as I say, the Barnsley District Performance Report. Just a general comment before we get stuck into it. As I read it through the first few pages, I was very aware of the fact that you feel a increasing demand on the force in Barnsley, and resources are stretched, tight in that way, and you have a vacancy rate, I think, of 15%, something like that.
That's right.
I just wonder what your feelings are around that. I mean, increasing demand, pressures on you, no additional resources, and the new officers are not going to come through for a bit yet. So,
I mean, that was the vacancy factor is accurate, but it is closing all the time. So we do have student officers arriving each month, so we're getting a steady flow through of officers now. We obviously do still have the students that come on their attachments from the university perspective, so they do offer some respite when they're with us for their 10 and 5 week periods. But we have got an increasing number now that are arriving and will remain with us. I'm aware that there's more still to come, and it'll be an improving picture as we head into the new year. Certainly as we get towards sort of late spring, early summer, we should start to close significantly through those gaps.
okay. So we're into next year, spring, summer, that sort of time.
Yeah.
The 10-week, that's the rotation with CID response, is that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so they come for two lots of 10 weeks and then a 5 week in each of the years. So the first year they'll spend 10 weeks with response, 10 weeks with neighbourhoods, and then 5 weeks with investigations, and then repeat it again the following year.
I see. Okay, thank you very much. I'm going on to page 19 now, if I may. This is 410 on the report. It talks there about crime types, talks about a reduction in burglary, which is good and very positive. It also talks about, in the final sentence there, about some crime types, in particular stalking and harassment being a reduction there. And I wonder whether you see that exactly as a positive, or whether we should be looking for more reporting of that, more recording of that.
That's a real dichotomy, isn't it, actually, because a lot of the increase of our recording of stalking and harassment has come about through greater awareness of crime recording standard. So we're picking out a lot of stalking and harassment crimes that sit alongside either domestic abuse or some other form of offence. So the increase reported in those has come really from more accurate recording as opposed to necessarily a prevalence of the particular crime. It's actually capturing those instances. So yeah, whilst we're reporting there is a reduction, it's not a significant reduction, and arguably I would have some concern that we want to make sure we're not missing those, so we're actually doing further checks around the crimes that we've got to make sure we're not missing the stalking and harassment offence.
So perhaps I could just add to that, Commissioner. You're well aware of all the time and effort we've put into improving crime data integrity in this force, and you'll also be aware that some forces up and down the country have had some real challenges with that. We're in a really strong position in terms of crime data integrity in this force. Stalking and harassment has been a real pinch point in that particular area because it's more often than not required to be recorded as an additional offence. So where you've got, particularly domestics, where you've got multiple different offences, often that forms a course of conduct that should properly be recorded as harassment. And we've had a real big push on that. So this has always been reported to us, or generally reported to us in one way or another. Sometimes it's just not been properly recorded. And what we've seen over the past, certainly the past 18 months, when you look at the vast increase, that's been very much down to us classifying it properly. So what you're seeing now is a plateau in that regard.
So some of this may be a disaggregation from a more complex domestic abuse.
So crime recording rules around domestic abuse and stalking and harassment are a particularly complicated part of the Home Office county rules, and another one that is under review at the moment in terms of trying to simplify them. But we are in a very, very good position in this force.
And is stalking harassment, is that part of the officers, or how much is the training given to new officers in regard to
a significant amount is given to them in relation to this, because it's often it's an offence where more often than not the victims are vulnerable, that they require a range of support services to support the victim. So we make sure that our officers are trained properly. There's been, aside from what officers received during their foundation training, there's been a number of different masterclasses and CPD inputs to officers, certainly in the time that I've been in the force.
Thank you. In the first sentence, though, you talk about the increase in the volume of vehicle crime, and I wondered there whether, I mean, it's not just any old person who can go along and steal a car and know what to do with it. I presume these are really organised people who know what they're about. And I wondered whether you were able to get hold of that and had any sense of whether any of these are repeat offenders and what you're able to do about it. If you could just say a word around that.
Yes, certainly. So, it is a bit of a mixed bag, but we do have, for sake of argument, we had nearly 30 Ford Fiestas stolen without the keys. Probably, we think, by 2 groups. We've made good inroads into at least one of the groups, and they were 16, 17, 18-year-old young men who were being given a device to block the keys that they could then use to steal the vehicles, and they were almost certainly stealing them to order. Those cars were then just moved on, and we've not seen them again since. So it's a mixed bag in terms of there's those that are stealing them to order and en masse, and then there are still people who will steal a car and just drive it around. But the big increase is down to that almost theft to order.
How are those investigations going?
It's currently going through the courts. We have had some really good success, some slight frustrations with the courts, in so much as that because they're juveniles, we've sought to remand and have been given bail and tagged and removed tags and remanded and bailed again. So it's a slight frustration for us, but we are seeing an improving picture there.
And without commenting necessarily on those cases going through, are these younger people? Are there other people behind them?
Almost certainly.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's the next.
That's
the next phase really, is to seek to identify where further up the chain this heads to.
Okay, thank you. Are they close, or is this over a wider area?
Oh, it's over the force wider and beyond.
Okay.
Yeah, and nationally we've seen a rise in vehicle crime.
No, I meant these particular groups of people. Aren't
yeah, we've got a Barnsley-based group, but our 29 Ford Fiestas are part of 50-something that have been stolen across the force, so they're free to travel across the county and into other counties.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm over the page on page 20. This is 5.3 and it's domestic abuse. We've noticed this before in other districts, the reduction in arrest rates for medium and standard risks, and that just concerned us a little bit. I mean, if you could say something around that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have seen a slight reduction in the arrest rate, albeit it does take some time to catch up if there's outstanding offenders. So for sake of argument, if one offender could comfortably be recorded against 4 or 5 crimes, so once that one offender is arrested, it makes a significant difference to the arrest rate. Clearly the definition widened, which increased the amount of domestic abuse incidents that we receive. And not all of them are suitable for arrest. Not all of them meet the requirement to make an arrest. The real positive, if you're going to come to it, but the real positive for Barnsley is the action taken against offenders in Barnsley is significantly higher than anywhere else, which says to me we're arresting the right people, we're investing time in those investigations, and we're prosecuting those people to a far higher degree than you'll see nationwide. So it doesn't cause me huge concerns that the arrest rate is reduced. If it fell again in the next quarter, it'd certainly be something to focus on. But while the action taken rate is as high as it is, that gives me reassurance that we're arresting the right people and taking the appropriate action.
That arrest rate across the force is intrusively monitored through Force Performance Day and at District Quarterly Performance Reviews. What Simon says is true. It's the broadening of the definition of domestic abuse means that there are incidents that get that domestic flag, but you wouldn't expect us, and the public wouldn't expect us to be exercised. So 2 teenagers squabbling over an Xbox remote control
that results in the police being called, and we do get calls to similar things like that, believe it or not. That's absolutely not where I expect anyone to be arrested. You know, that's to be dealt with in an entirely different way. But absolutely, where there's high risks involved, where there's intimate partners, where there's coercive controlling behaviour, where there are a series of aggravating factors that mean that the victim are vulnerable and they are at risk of future harm, absolutely, there's a real expectation that our officers arrest the perpetrator and do it quickly, and everything that we can to ensure that there's an effective outcome to that incident. Now that might be a judicial outcome. It will almost certainly involve support to the victim through a range of third-party agencies, but it may well result in a issue of the domestic violence protection notice as well. And you will be well aware, Commissioner, that our charge rates in relation to domestic abuse are some of the highest in any police force nationally, with the highest user of DVPNs of any police force nationally. So we are in a good space, but it's something that we do continue to monitor.
In the next paragraph, 5.4, sorry, in that paragraph 5.4, the final sentence, domestic abuse profiling gets around 75% of investigations of violence offences, including stalking and harassment. I just wonder, it seems very high, that's all, but whether that concerns you or whether this is just part of the course now.
Sorry, which particular
it's 5.4 and it's the last sentence, and it's talking about 75% of investigations are violence offences.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me, given that it's obviously that's within the heading of domestic abuse. So as the DCC said, that's the majority of our domestic abuse will involve some form of violence, and the reasons we've just discussed around the stalking harassment element of it. But again, even that, the violence varies to quite a large degree. From, you know, we had one of the first prosecution for non-fatal strangulation, so that's at one end down to, you know, a tussle over an Xbox controller could be a violent offence too. So it doesn't surprise me that the proportion, but there's a lot further detail.
It doesn't surprise me at all. In fact, I'm surprised it's only 75%.
Right, and that's partly because the definition of violence is probably not what clicks in my head. It's a broader spread.
Everything from verbal threats through to attempted murder.
Okay, gosh,
and
what a violent person I am. Yeah. Okay, thank you. 5.7, this is DVP, we're talking about DVPs. I don't see anything in the para there or in the book about breaches of these notices and orders. Well, it's the orders in that get breached. And I wonder whether you could say anything around that and what happens as a result of people do breach.
Yeah, so that's certainly something I've picked up on. Going back to Barnsley, is actually we do need to do more work around the proactively monitoring adherence to the protection notice, and that's something that we've started doing in the last 8 weeks. And essentially, if the parties are back together in contravention of it, they'll be arrested and put back before the courts for a separate offence. So that's something that we're really keen to work on, because there's unfortunately a lot of our victims of domestic abuse, there is an element of coercive control in there, and arguably even having the DVPN in place doesn't stop the perpetrator going back if the victim doesn't say anything. If the victim doesn't phone us and let us know, then the DVPN's fairly worthless. So it's really down to us to proactively manage them and get out and visit them. And if we find the perpetrator back with the victim in contravention, they'll be arrested.
Okay. Difficult areas, aren't they?
They are, and obviously we put in place domestic violence protection notices whether the victim wants to have it or not. We have the power to put them in place for their protection, whether they agree to them or not, which clearly then creates an issue. If the perpetrator's present, they may not let us in, they won't tell us. So it is a complicated area.
I'm on page 21. Don't worry if you're worrying that we're going at a slow speed here. I've got a number of questions at the beginning of the report. It tails off after that. On page 21, child protection now, and this is Paris 5.8, 5.9, 5.10, I think. It says 88% of these child protection issues relate to welfare issues. I just wonder if you could say something around that and how well you think the Barnsley Police work with partners to address those issues.
Absolutely. So the working relationship with partners in Barnsley is second to none. I've worked across the force. I've worked at Barnsley previously, and I'm really pleased to see when I've gone back the working relationship with children's social care or community safety or whoever it is as strong as it's ever been. I've got a really good relationship with children's social care. The Director of Children's Services and I speak regularly 3-4 times a week. She's relatively new in post, having just come from Sheffield. And this is an area of work.
Is that
Carly Speechley? Yes. That's right, yeah. So we've just implemented a development board to just fine-tune and hone the working relationship even further. So the child protection, child exploitation agenda is very much at the forefront of our conversations and our work going into the new year.
And Carly Speechley is a good officer, so that's excellent. 511 cybercrime. 53% of cyber offences relate to sexual offences, and again I wondered what you were doing around that and how successful you feel you are.
That's again, risk of repeating myself. There's a difficult area of work given a lot of this is children using online, so social media platforms. Some of which lose images almost immediately, and arguably, again, some of it, whilst it naturally fits within the definition, children can inadvertently easily get caught in amongst committing an offence without realising by having images, forwarding images that they didn't intend to. So there's probably more education work we can do through the Children's Safeguarding Partnership. Through to education, I think, rather than going down the route necessarily of enforcement.
What you have in relation to that, if you look at cyber-enabled sexual offending between children, you have everything from the swapping of images between children, which is an entirely different proposition than organised paedophiles who do operate online and do operate in that space and proactively go after targeting children. We obviously have a very, very organised response to the latter that involves working very closely with the regional crime units and the National Crime Agency, and we do proactively target paedophiles who use the internet to abuse children. But by the same token, we've got that capability locally to be able to deal with, two school children who may have sent an image to one another that's inappropriate, and it requires a broad range of response.
That latter group that you were talking with, those dealing with the paedophiles, they're the ones in Wombwell police station. Is that where they're located?
Well, they're based within the regional organised crime unit.
Okay. Thank you. That was 511, 512. 512, yes, the child exploitation officer. I think that's really good news. I guess you think that too?
Yeah, that's a member of our response team that we've just detached for a short period just to prove a concept, really. And you can see just through the additional scrutiny. So that part of the work I'm looking at with Carly Speechley is to seek to establish a child exploitation joint working group. It will actually be contextual safeguarding joint working group, because I think that's an area that we really need to develop into the new year. So looking at peer-on-peer violence, missing children, child sexual exploitation, child criminal exploitation, but in a broader sense. But yeah, that role was already proving its worth.
Thank you very much. On to page 22. Well, just note on page 22. This is 6.3. You're talking about residential burglaries. You mentioned Penistone. I just need to put on record that I've noted that you've said that, because I go to meetings in Penistone where they tell me we don't notice the crime that happens in Penistone. Well, I've noted it today, so we'll move on swiftly to page 23. Retail crime, 6.12, 6.12. You say there in that paragraph there's no particular pattern to retail crime, but you then mention two concerning incidents, as you would call them, and I just wonder what had happened as a result of the activity there.
I'm not cited on the specifics around those two, but certainly it's a conversation that I'm having regularly at the moment with Sir Steve Bowden in relation to the town centre. There's obviously an awful lot of money being spent in the town centre. We're working very closely with the business and retail forums, given the prevalence of new shops and lots of development around the cinema and the bowling alley. I think we're doing a lot of work with the neighbourhood team there in the town centre around reassurance. I can certainly come back to you with the specifics around those.
I'm just interested to know what the outcomes were, that was all. But I did have meetings in the glassworks and in the retail buildings, and the malls, the two malls, there with business owners, retail owners, and those who manage the centres, and they're obviously concerned with, they want it to go well for very obvious reasons, but they seem to have very good relations with the police in Glassworks, obviously. So on to 24, and 6.21 towards the bottom of the page, antisocial behaviour. Be grateful for your thoughts on this, really. Antisocial behaviour, you say it's decreasing and all the figures point to that, and that's got to be a good thing. We've mentioned it before in these meetings, though. When I go to meetings of the public, I really do find that a hard sell. They won't have it, and in fact I'm very wary of saying that antisocial behaviour is decreasing. But I mean, if it is decreasing, I think we need to think about how we enable the public to understand that, and how we deal with that in terms of publicity and the like. And I don't know the answer to this, and I don't think you've got any answers to it, whether we do it through the neighbourhood teams, putting stuff out or whatever, but I really do find it very hard. I think it's, if you think about it, I've written a blog about that, I think it may be this week, coming out tomorrow, you could have a look on there, where I note a difference between, if there's a crime like a burglary, it's a one-off crime, it affects you, and it's disturbing, it's awful. If it's antisocial behaviour, it just goes on and on and on. There's something relentless about it, and it just kind of wears people down. I think it's that aspect to it which is so disturbing for people. But if you've got any good ideas about how we persuade the public that antisocial behaviour is going down and the police are making a difference, be grateful to hear it.
Chronicle is always a good way to communicate with people in Barnsley, isn't it? And because if you say something in the Chronicle that people don't agree with, then they immediately write to the editor and find out.
If the Chronicle says a thing, are they likely to believe the Chronicle?
In Barnsley, if you, I chaired the hospital, as you know, for 10 years, and if it's in the Chronicle, it's true, and anything else that anybody says isn't particular.
So the Chronicle is the key. Okay, we'll leave it with you. Thank you very much. I'm on page 25, at the bottom there, 6.26, and this is rural crime. And I note there the success of the bike team, which again in PAB we've noticed that many times now in each of the districts. They really do make a difference. And I note the equipment that they're now using, the long lens cameras for catching people at a great distance, and the use of drones as well. That all seems good stuff. Thank you. Page 29, jumping on a bit, nearly at the end of the report. I had to squint to look at the table, but when I looked at the table under stop search to see these figures, it says 7.9. I think you're using the new census figures in here. You'll correct me if I'm wrong about that. But I'm not sure that we've got the census figures for ethnicity yet. So when they come through, that's likely to make a difference to stop search. I don't know whether it'll make much of a difference in Barnsley because you have such a heavily white population anyway, but it should make some small difference there. Don't there's anything you want to say about stop search?
No, obviously we do note the disproportionality rate.
Yes.
However, when you look at the number of searches, they really aren't statistically significant. So there's only 4 black people being searched in that entire group. It's like 390 searches. The 385 white people, there's only 4 black people searched. So it's just really, we note the disproportionality rate. I think it would be wrong to draw any sort of adverse inference from it.
Well, you only need small numbers either way to make such a big difference proportionately, don't you? And that's really makes, I wouldn't say it makes a nonsense of these figures, but it doesn't help us. Michael, I don't know whether you, IEP, you're interested in this. I don't know if you have any comment on this.
Well, I mean, we've been tracking this issue for a long time. I think the final sentence really is the cautionary sentence that where numbers are so small. My impression is that at 1.4 or 1.4 times, that is lower than the comparable rate in Sheffield.
It is.
Yes.
But whether that's simply because
Which is
figures
significantly
are
lower
or
than the
whether
national rate.
there are other factors, I wouldn't want to offer a view. Clearly, I think the next census release, or it may have already taken place, does include the ethnicity data. I think the anticipation is that that will have a significant impact in Sheffield. Whether it has had in Barnsley, I think we'll just have to wait and see.
The number of searches is so small, and I'm not sure it'll make a huge difference.
Well, when I go to meetings, I've said this before in Pat, when I go to meetings, I sometimes, if this is an issue, stop search, I sometimes ask the audience to tell us things not in percentage terms, but in numbers terms. How many white youths do you think have been stop searched this time? And they get the figures hopelessly wrong. They just think that there are more black and Asian kids being stop searched than white. They always do, every meeting I go to, which isn't true. It's all about proportionality. But it's interesting if that's in the public mind. But, and it's those percentage proportionate figures that
I think what we've been trying to get at is the extent to which you can localise the data. You know, that there are districts right across the country that are almost uniformly white, and there are districts which have got a very clear non-white majority, so that the perception is likely to reflect the locality of the district. I think we tended very much to operate on county-wide and on district-wide figures, and haven't, as far as I know, broken down proportionality issues to smaller neighbourhoods. And whether we have the ability to do that, whether it's useful information, I don't know, but it doesn't surprise me that you get a mismatch between what the public in a particular neighbourhood may say and what the data across a broader geographical area is saying. I mean, maybe Tim's got other insights. But
Yeah, I mean, this is what you say is, you know, if you look at certain areas of the city, more people, black people get searched there than do in Penston, for example. There's nothing particularly unremarkable, you know, there's nothing particularly remarkable about the data, is the way I describe it.
other than that, there is a degree of disproportionality.
There is. But if you look, you know, for example, we do more stop searches in Burntgreave than we do in Penistone, because there are, you know, different issues that are more significant. You know, we have more issues around drugs, more issues around weapons. So the public would expect us to do more proactive work in those areas.
We also need the figures by age as well. That makes a difference, I think, too. Okay, thank you. Simon, was there anything that you wanted to draw attention to?
No, I don't think so. I think just, overall performance in the district has been really strong this last year. I've only been there 8 weeks, so I've taken over at a really good time. Things are some real positivity around the students coming through, the direct entries coming through, the sort of attempted house. So there's some real positivity there. I think the real highlight for me at Barnsley, having worked there previously, is the work ethic amongst the staff there is phenomenal. The teamwork amongst the district is just second to none, and the partnership relationship, as I alluded to earlier, is really strong. So I've got really high hopes for next year.
Barnsley have got a particularly strong detection rate as well, and that wasn't always the case. When we got back 2.5–3 years ago, we had one of the poorest detection rates in the force, and it's now leads the way, particularly so in relation to domestic abuse. There's a lot that's driven by domestic abuse detections. So we're actively looking at what goes on at Barnsley and how that's done to make sure that we can try and pass some of that around the force.
Well, thank you for the report. I mean, the Barnsley reports in the past have always been very positive, very good, with good examples of the work that's being done, and a lot in there about the trends that you've noticed, and we're warm to all that. So you have a high bar to keep up with. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. You're very welcome to stay or to go, whichever you prefer.
Stay, that's right.
Yes, please. That was item 10, Barnsley District Summary Report. We're on to the force performance against the police and crime plan, and the third of our 3 priorities is treating people fairly, and the report is pages 31 to 50, and I guess, Tim, this is yourself.
It is, yes.
We'll do what we normally do then, and we won't, as I say, go through it page by page. Just one general comment I would make about this report, and my perception generally is the amount of work that the force is doing at the moment around issues to do with equality, diversity and inclusion. I think it's very impressive what the force are doing, and it seems to be being very well received and really good that the force, it's important you do it for the sake of the force and your own, the well-being of your own workforce, but it's also important obviously for engagement with the work.
Well, and we do take it, we want South Yorkshire Police to be an inclusive place where everyone can come to work and be themselves. That's, it's the right thing to do. The second bit is that we want to encourage a organisation where we have people who think differently, and people from different backgrounds think differently, and that means that we challenge ourselves in different ways to get better. And I have to say, I do get a little bit irritated when I read in the press about some of this being described as woke. This is not woke. This is about building an outstanding organisation, and you look at every single outstanding organisation, whether it's in the public sector or the private sector, they do this and they do it really, really well, because you bring different people together who challenge each other. That's how you get better and make it, you sustainably get better. So that's why we do it.
I've written a blog about woke tomorrow, so you're very welcome to read that. It's a good Advent wake up. It's a good Advent, right, okay. Page 33, 3.9. Again, just to note that the gender ratio in South Yorkshire Police is pretty close to 50-50, 49.7 over against 50.3. And I imagine you're very pleased about that. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual trend, a gradual change here.
Absolutely, and I'd point to the journey that this organisation's been on over a long period of time. Remind it, I think it was probably back maybe 2011, maybe 10 years ago. This force had never had a female chief officer ever. And you look at female representation now right across the service, whether it's the command team, whether it's at senior operational roles. We have a fantastic workforce made up of men and women who are absolutely dedicated to making the organisation better.
Okay. Lauren, I don't know if you want to comment on that at all.
Sorry, there's a lot of banging going on here at the moment as my new boys is going on.
We were just noting that your gender balance in the force is almost 50-50.
Yeah, it's taken probably about 15 years to get from there when work really started on going around that. But of course we're really pleased to see such good representation now. It's a shame we didn't have this report at the last panel, because I would have had a tiny female group sitting across the table from me then.
That's okay.
But we're also starting to see now the sort of number of officers from, or number of applicants from minority ethnic backgrounds increasing as well. So we know it will take time to get there, but we are absolutely committed to increasing our representation.
Yeah, that's another story though, isn't it? It's going to be more difficult to get there. And when the new ethnicity figures are released, South Yorkshire's ethnic balance is likely to be worsened by that, isn't it? I don't know how much.
It is. I mean, my understanding from some, I've not actually seen a definitive layout of the figures, but I did hear something in the media talking about going from 9% to 12%. Now that's across, obviously in Sheffield it'll be different. So it will become more challenging, but I do think that the structures that we've got in place now, and you talked about it, about all the work we're doing around EDI, we've got our positive action team, we are starting to see slow signs of success, but it will take years to do that. It will take years to do that. But we're absolutely committed to doing it because, as I say, this is about building a workforce that will challenge itself to be, an outstanding organisation.
Kevin, I don't know whether you can switch on and we can say something, but I think you may have the ethnicity figures for the country as a whole, or sorry, not the country, the county as a whole.
Yeah, they have been released actually. ONS released them last week. I think you're right, other than white, for South Yorkshire's now at 12%, I think. So 2011 census it was just over 9.
Yeah.
So South Yorkshire as a whole is 12% other than white.
So it's a bigger challenge than we thought. Okay. I'm on page 34 now, 3.13, 3.13, and again it's about representation across the various levels, various ranks. Female officers, 28.5% represented at police sergeant. That seems a bit disappointing.
Well,
jarring.
Disappointing. I mean, obviously we would like to see that. If we're going to continue to have a pipeline of senior officers from all backgrounds, we've got to continue to build that pipeline. We have very good representation among female officers at many of our senior ranks. I think what we've got there is a moment in time in terms of sergeants. What we're doing as a force at the moment is investing significantly in training the next generation of junior leaders. So, I'd point to our Sergeant's Technical Skills course, which is now being commissioned and has been rolled out across the force. Every new sergeant undertakes a 3-day course. We have the Leadership Academy now, which is available to everyone in the force, which gives people the leadership skills that they need in order to develop those skills and develop their careers towards promotion. And all that is designed because we know, given the demographics of the workforce as a result of uplift, we are going to need sergeants and inspectors at a relatively young time of their service. So, in 3 years' time, it won't be uncommon to see sergeants with 3 or 4 years' service, and I don't think it'd be that uncommon to see inspectors with 6 or 7 years' service, and that has to happen because if we don't, we won't have enough. What I am heartened by is, whenever I go to our training school now, whenever I am out and about and meet new recruits, and I do periodically actually just participate in interviewing new recruits myself, the quality of recruits that are joining us now, whether they're men, women, whether they're from, whether they're white or whether they're from some other ethnic background, the quality of the recruits that are joining our now, I genuinely believe is better than ever. So the opportunities to be able to push some of those people through to junior and middle leadership roles over the next few years are there, and absolutely something we want to take advantage of.
So when you say at the end of that para 3.13 that you'll be reviewing this, it's review with the intention of improving that representation.
What we want to do is make sure that the very best young officers are
putting themselves forward for promotion to ensure that we've got the right quality of supervision for the force for the next generation. And that's going to be really, really important because I mean, we will talk about it today about budget issues, but we know the force is going to have a tough time in terms of our strategic finances over the next few years, and we're going to have to make changes, and we're going to have to do things differently. And the key ingredient in delivering that is leadership, and we need effective operational leadership, and we need a significant pool of people who've got effective operational leadership skills at the front line, which is why we've put those things in place now, because we know that that will develop over the next 2 or 3 years.
Well, is pay a big factor in people not wanting to proceed as to be a sergeant or an inspector?
I don't think it's necessarily pay to get promoted. Certainly not at those. I mean, one of the issues, certainly going from sergeant to inspector, is that people don't qualify for overtime payments once you become an inspector. Pay more generally is an issue at the moment, but that's an entirely different debate. I think the challenge is that many people, I think, this is a personal opinion just based on my experiences, people feel that they need more experience to do it, so you might not get people putting themselves forward for promotion until they've got 7, 8, 9 years service. And for some people that's right, they want to learn things at a slower pace and to progress at a slower pace. But as an organisation, we need more than just that in terms of pulling people through. And we absolutely need to pull people through to sergeant and inspector at an earlier stage of service to make sure that we've got the strength and depth at those ranks. And we can't just rely on people learning by peer experience alone. We have to train it, and we have to make sure we've got the investment in leadership training to enable that.
Okay. Lucy, how long were you at PC?
So I've been promoted for 4 years, so I had 11 years service at the time.
Quite a relatively long time.
Yeah, I wanted to do my detective first, so I delayed it slightly.
On to 36, page 36. This is para 3.29. The Equality Hub. Just to say, I went to the inclusion symposium, did you call it, or conference? Yes, at NAG. I thought that was really good.
Yeah.
Very positive, a lot of positive energy in the room, and I guess you were pleased with that. But
we were. I have to say, you might want to bring the chief in. The chief opened it both days. No. Okay. Okay.
Sound issues.
Right. Okay. But absolutely, it was. Everyone reported it was a really positive event, and many staff got the opportunity to go to it. I'd also just talking about events, the Black History Month event was really well attended, and was it was a really interesting evening. It was attended by a broad cross section of staff from across the force, and I thought it was a really enjoyable evening, and certainly I learnt a lot and got a lot from it personally.
Good. Just continuing on that, on 3.30, 330. Neurodiversity, I just wonder if you'd say something about that, and how well you think SYP understand what that encompasses, what that's about.
I'd probably describe it as I think we have a good understanding, we have good staff support networks. I think it's really, really important that we as senior leaders understand the benefits that a workforce with I suppose a broad church of people with neurodiverse conditions, that the value that can bring to the organisation, and for me that again it comes back to the issue about having people in the organisation who think differently, who view challenges and issues through a different prism than the rest of us, because we have a lot of challenges and a lot of issues to deal with. Because again, when you've got people who can approach things from a different
angle, you bring people who bring a different perspective, it just means that you make better decisions, and as an organisation you thrive. So we're very, very passionate about it. We've got staff support networks to support people with a range of different neurodiverse conditions. We do an awful lot around dyslexia assessments, and making sure that our officers have got the equipment to enable them to operate. For example, quite happily in terms of whether it's anything from dictation software on the computers through to different coloured pocket books that make it easier to read material, a whole range of different things.
Do we go outside the organisation at all for advice, help around this?
Absolutely we do. But
yeah, I think it's part of the broader network that we work with lots of organisations, particularly colleagues from POD are always looking at how we can learn from others and that almost take best practice, and that's not necessarily just from police organisations but from that wider network of the public and the private sector. So we are trying to, as you know, we are trying to be a learning organisation and learn from others. So we're building it in at all levels, including from recruitment and how we can, use some of those things in terms of recruiting and making our adverts more attractive. So we're using it in a whole range of things, but yeah, we're certainly learning from others.
Okay, thank you. On page 37, 3.33, that little paragraph there, in fact, is one sentence. I couldn't understand it. I'm sure it was saying, I started off all right, and then I got lost. It became like a little swamp for me, and I couldn't.
Paragraph 3.33.
Yes.
So the leadership. So
it sounds well. It sounds that it's not very good, whatever it is. But I can't quite work out what's going on and what you're. Are you happy?
Are you looking at the same 3.33 that I am?
I probably am.
So
well, tell me what it means.
The Leadership Academy,
yes.
which we've set up
yes.
through People and Development, this provides a range of courses that are accessible from anyone in the force, and that can range from managing performance through to having difficult conversations with people, various psychometric, a whole range of different leadership disciplines. As I say, everyone can access them. They range from a full day's course through to I think it's a 1 hour sort of soundbite course online. This work, as I say, has been led by People and Development. Anyone from across the force can access these courses, and we actively encourage people from all ranks to avail themselves of the opportunities. We are now starting to see a really high rate of booking. People know what's available, and they are starting to book on them with some regular. Now that, when it first started, as with most things, it's quite a slow start. One of the challenges that we've had to address is because some of our operational teams are so busy dealing with day-to-day work that they've not necessarily had the time to commit to that form of continuing professional development. But we've done quite a lot of work particularly with our district colleges, to make sure that people are given the time to be able to do it and access it.
So okay, that's me being a bit slow.
So it's a good news story. We've got a leadership academy.
Okay.
Not every force has a leadership academy. This is all about developing that pipeline of talent.
Lots of people are applying.
Yeah.
And whereas in the past they might not have been able to do it because they were being abstracted all the time, now they can.
It's now starting to get a much higher uptake.
That's brilliant. Page 38 had something under wellbeing, 3.44. It talks there about, alongside the wider offer for officers and staff, the force works to tailor the wellbeing support via the bespoke wellbeing plans. I just wondered how you monitor that, or whether they are monitored, these bespoke plans.
So, well, they're monitored in so much as particularly districts and departmental command teams are asked to account for them, periodically through quarterly performance review processes, where we absolutely want to understand what is being done locally. One of the comments from HMIC was that the well-being offer that we have in this force is really comprehensive. The challenge with having a really comprehensive offer is that you've got to get people to take it up. And sometimes people do it off their own accord. Sometimes it has to be managed, and it's the it has to be managed bit that we want to see from particularly our district command teams, but also some of our operational departments as well.
Okay. Chief Constable, I think you are now able to talk to us.
Apologies if there's loud drilling noise starts again. I'll get back onto mute. Sorry, I put my hand up. It's a little while ago now. It's about when you mentioned the inclusion conference, which obviously took place a couple of weeks ago. So it ran for 2 days. It was the same content on both days, really promoting the staff networks. Just to say really, and I think Tim probably touched on it, we've had really excellent feedback from those that attended. And we certainly reached out to a really broad section of the workforce, and we included taking some officers there as part of their detention officer training as well, just to make them aware of the kind of support that's available out there for some of our new staff groups. And just to cover briefly, you mentioned the question about neurodiversity. That is one of our newest staff networks, so it is still growing. And they've really got 2 strands to them. So they look at supporting officers and staff who are neurodiverse, whether that's dyslexia, dyspraxia, autistic spectrum disorder, a really broad range. But they're also doing quite a lot of supporting parents of children who have got neurodiversity issues as well. So I think that's a really valuable part of their work. And just recently, the Federation organised some neurodiversity training, which was really well received by some of the Fed reps, and we're now looking to roll that out across the organisation a bit more broadly as well.
Yes, thank you very much. And as I say, I did go to one of those morning sessions, and I thought it had a really good feel to it, so that was very pleasing. Very good. Thank you. That was 3.4 for well-being. I'm on to page 39, 3.51, talking in there about workload pressures, and the para seems to be mainly, well, entirely about pressures on officers. There are clearly pressures on staff as well as officers, and I wonder whether that's getting the focus that it needs in the force.
So just to give some reassurance really that the demand pressures that the organisation is facing is recognised across all staff and officers. So equally the focus, the interventions, the range of things that we've put in place cover across both staff and officers. So no, we obviously being a police member of staff myself, I would want to make sure that we were equally being cognizant of it, but secondly making sure that we were putting the right things in place.
Yeah. I mean, I had a meeting with trade unions myself the other day, the staff trade unions, and clearly with the financial situation, that's where anxieties begin to be raised, I think.
Yeah, and we work really hard with the trade unions. We've been quite open and transparent and actively, proactively working with them. They understand the challenge that we face. They understand that will have an impact on police staff potentially in the future. So we are proactively working with them to work with us on that. So they know, and I would hope that they've said that we've been really very proactive in our engagement with them, and we're right from the outset really, without the financial challenges that we face. So we do see this as very much a kind of collaborative way of working with them, but do recognise that absolutely puts people under pressure. People will be anxious, in their home lives as well as their work lives, and that's something that we recognise.
No, they did say that was the case, and they were grateful for it. But of course, they're realists at the end of the day. But they're great loyalty to the organisation too.
I mean, I'd have to say that we've got a really positive working relationship with the unions, And actually, they, just to echo the point that you've made, Commissioner, they are very realistic. They are very pragmatic about, where we are, and we are working, like I said, in that kind of problem-solving, collaborative way. It doesn't mean to say that we will have an answer that everybody likes. I need to be realistic about that. But what I would hope they would say is that nothing's going to come as a surprise to them. That they are part of, us trying to solve what is a very difficult challenge for us.
I think that's what they welcome. That the feeling that nothing will come as a surprise.
No, absolutely not.
That's really important.
Yeah, it is really important.
Page 42, this is 3.73, it's under the heading Complaints. I just wondered what sort of training student officers received around this complaints.
In terms of complaints,
yes.
Well, I suppose what I'd say to you is right from the outset, we try to, we don't train people to avoid complaints. What we do is train people to display the highest professional standards at all times. And that's the way that I would describe it. We do a huge amount of work in terms of giving our student officers the knowledge and practical skills to which they need to be able to discharge the duties in the office of constable. We also do a huge amount in terms of instilling the values of fairness and integrity and trust amongst all our staff to make sure that when they are discharging their duties as either a police officer or a member of police staff, that they're doing it in line with those values, and they've got at the forefront of their mind ensuring that everything we do is focused on serving the communities of South Yorkshire. So that's what we do. Everyone knows that complaints happen. Some happen because on occasions we don't do a job that is good enough, and when we do that we acknowledge it and we try to put it right. But what we do is set about making sure that people have the right values and the right professional knowledge and are able to do their job in the most professional way possible.
Okay. Page 44, top of the page, 3.79. You reference there, and I know this is the case, that senior officers, you'll be putting a lot of time and effort into meeting student officers and doing the sort of things you've just been talking about, and that's very good. Start of their careers, there's a lot of them coming through, so it's very important to do that at this moment in time. I just wonder whether you had any sense of how, or what kind of an impact that's having, or whether it is having an impact, or whether it's having the impact that you would hope it's having.
In terms of
how is it being received? Do you have any sense of that?
what, in terms of senior officer visibility?
Yeah, and what you're saying to the student officers and what you're doing.
Well, we do get out and about and see as many people as we can. The chief and she may wish to talk about, we recently did a whole series of different events around the force trying to meet as many people as possible. We do Operation Duxford once a month, which you'll be aware of at each district, where the command team go out and are quite visible in that. And aside from that, we all individually make sure that we spend time with the staff in our own respective portfolios. I'm going to have to say, we occasionally get out on patrol. I was out on patrol in Sheffield City Centre on Saturday night myself this week. And I think staff do appreciate it. They do want to see us out and about and do want to make sure that we give them a consistent message about the direction that we want to take the force, and a really consistent message about the standards that we aspire to and the values that we want people to adhere to whilst doing the business of South Yorkshire Police.
I knew you were doing a Duxford because you were wandering past my house, and indeed I was in Broom Hill and I came across two patrolling officers Broom Hill, which was really good. But, thank you. Just at the bottom page, 3.85, just a matter of interest. You talk there, or whoever wrote the report, there are 9 rights of the victim. Are there not 12 rights of the victim?
That's a different letter, anyway. I'll have to check on that.
Just wonder which 3 left off the list.
We'll come back to you with that one.
So we'll check,
be able to check that.
Okay, page 46. 3 point, good grief, 100. this is Hate Crime Awareness Week, which took place in October. It says the engagement was not met by the public with the usually positive response. I don't know what to make of that, and I just wonder what what can be done about it.
I think some of this, when I talk about the press and the way that some of these things are painted wrong, we want to be seen. We're seen as a police service that is absolutely on the side of the public and absolutely not on the side of criminals. And if you are out committing crime in South Yorkshire, making life a misery for our communities, look out, because we're here and we're here to protect communities. And I want that to be a really, really clear message. But when I talk about communities, that means all communities, irrespective of your background, your ethnicity, whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're straight, whether you're gay. It matters not to us. We want to provide a service to all communities. You will have seen in certain sections of the press, campaigns looking to support, for example, transgender people, painted as woke, not what the police should be doing. That's not an instead of. It's about providing a service to all communities, and we are a service that seeks to protect each and every member of the community, irrespective of how they live their lives, what their background is. And I do worry a little bit at times is how some of this is painted in the press. But as I say, this is not optional. This is about providing a service to all the community, and I do not want it to be seen as anything other than South Yorkshire Police on the side of communities and not on the side of criminals.
So you think this is all around that wokery debate?
That's what it refers to.
Okay. Oh, makes sense. I think that's everything, Tim, unless there are things...
No, that's fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. That was 11 on the agenda paper, forced performance, Chief Executive reporting, and that's item 12, strategic and financial planning for the coming financial year. Michelle, 51 to 58.
Thanks, Commissioner. So yes, the background and the legislation is set out on page 51, and the process for strategic and financial planning is at Appendix A. Page 52, we get into the meat of the update, really. So you hold your monthly planning and efficiency group meetings. You have a PEG that's SYP and a PEG that's OPCC now, so that we can do some planning separately and together. There's two tracks to that. There's the strategic planning around the policing priorities for South Yorkshire. You set a plan, you review it every year, and you have signalled an intention to release a new plan with the same three priorities, but some slightly changed areas of focus for February-March time. So we're just bringing together the information. There won't be massive changes, there'll just be some nuancing that I'll discuss with DCC4, and we've got a key meeting this week where all of those bits of thinking will come together. The second track is obviously the financial one, the budget setting and the precept proposal that you have to take to the Police and Crime panel and consult on through statutory consultation with the public, which has been launched. So I don't know whether Sophie, who's on the line, wants to say any more about the financial situation, but as I say, in terms of the priority setting, we've got a key couple of meetings coming up. Fiona's team stands ready in relation to design and print for the new plan, which will go out simultaneously with the setting of the budget. That's what usually happens. Sophie, do you want to come in relation to the financial challenges?
Yes, I can do. Just safe to say, really, this year it's a particularly challenging year. There's been a lot of uncertainty, as you're aware, politically and economically. We've got big fluctuations in inflation, interest rates, the cost of living, etc., which have caused us to revisit the assumptions that we made for the budget in September when we agreed those at the PEG then. So we're in the process, we've been through the strategic planning process and we've done an initial draft of the medium-term resource strategy, but we're in the process now of revising the figures on the basis of updated assumptions for inflation, etc. Those are just about ready. I understand they're going to SCT tomorrow. We've updated our OPCC figures and then they'll be presented at the next PEG meeting on the 19th of December, when we should have received the settlement, which we're hoping will be coming this Thursday, but we won't know until we get that. And then that will enable us to go into the consultation process with leaders and the budget familiarisation session, and to continue the public consultation to arrive at a final budget in time for the meetings in February.
Thank you, Sophie. And just draw attention to paragraph 4.3. You mentioned earlier, Commissioner, the sort of no surprises with the unions. Of course, last financial year, planning year, you asked the force for a comprehensive savings plan by September just gone, because we could see the budget gap that was emerging, and so that it didn't have a significant impact on SYP's reserves, SY's reserves. And discussions are still ongoing with the force in relation to the operational impacts of that, as well as the capital programme. On the public consultation side, I don't know whether Fiona wants to add anything, but suffice to say the survey is out, the window closes for the public at the end of the month. We're asking for corporate comms and SYP to give it one last push. The response rate is very good compared to previous years, and the opinion seems to be favourable in terms of understanding the realism, the pragmatism that we discussed earlier, the realism of the public as well, in understanding that finances are hard and that council taxpayers have to pay a little bit more to get the services maintained that they enjoy from public services. Fiona, I don't think there's any more to say at this stage until the full results are in and analysed, is that right?
That's still perfect there, thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. That's the result, Commissioner.
Thank you. Anybody got any questions or comments on that? All happy? Okay, thank you very much. That was 12, 13 PCC decisions, 57, 58.
Yes, Commissioner, there's a monthly report that we do on the decisions of public interest that you've made since the last meeting. There's only been 3 on this occasion. At 4.2.1, what we know as the speed awareness course, the NDORS, National Driver Offender Retraining Scheme that we have to contribute to. Windows 10 cost for force to enable work as part of the National Enabling Programme, and then some capital work to some leasehold premises at Pioneer Close.
Those schemes, are they speeding awareness schemes? Are they all back in person now, or are they doing them?
I've no idea. they do both.
This is confession time.
I'm confessing. You can choose.
Oh, you can choose. Oh, right. Okay. What?
I
Choose
can confess to having confirmed that.
You can choose whether you do it virtually or in person.
Yeah. Right. Okay. There's no need to go any further.
I never do. That's why I'm just confirming.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Thank you. So that was 13, 14, the work programme, Michelle, 5962.
Yes, just looking ahead, it's Sheffield's district report in January, and the force level performance is tackling crime and antisocial behaviour again. We have been looking at the work programme going onwards from that, at a spotlight on victims, victim satisfaction, victim services from our office, etc. So we're going to be talking to the force in relation to that. We've also agreed this morning reintroducing updates in relation to HMI CFRS inspections, so force readiness, but also inspections that have happened where we've got good news to tell or recommendations to report to the public around. So those 2 will be put on the work programme, aside from those that were part of the actions updates earlier in the meeting, Commissioner.
Any comments on that?
Can I say, in terms of the HMIC updates, what frequency are you thinking?
you say, but it feels like we ought to have one around January, February.
February would be a good time to do it.
Yeah.
And maybe 1 1/4, just even if you just touch it as a, maybe not one, maybe once every 6 months, just in terms of where we're up to.
Yeah, it depends on the inspection frequency, I think, doesn't it?
And I think, I know certainly our next P inspection, we've got the dates through now, will be sort of the back end of 2024 and published in 25. So
we'll
you know,
slow it down. We'll perhaps
but
start.
obviously there'll be a number of different thematics over that period.
Yeah. No, we can talk about it and just do something that's sensible.
Okay, so before March 20. Okay, thank you. That was 14. Assurance panel reporting IP. This is 15. Independent ethics panel. Michael, you've been looking at well-being in the force. And there's a
Well, we've presented our report, which is at item 15, and the ethics panel received a detailed presentation from SYP on the 25th of November, on the basis of which we felt that what we'd heard and what we were able to explore, we ought to bring to you as an element of reassurance about where well-being sits and the importance that it has within the organisation. I've tried to sum that up in paragraph 110. I think our overall feeling was that SYP has many of the characteristics of an outstanding and exemplary employer, but that it's not simply self-serving. And we've heard lots of examples this afternoon of taking what other organisations could feel was a problem, neurodiversity being an example, and actually turning the response into a strength of the organisation. And I think that's very much a characteristic of what the challenges of well-being for a workforce of 5,000 could represent, and how the response to that is comprehensive and enormously positive, and that there's plenty of evidence emerging that there is a very strong level of engagement from the force, from the workforce, whether that be staff or officers. So we felt we wanted to offer you that reassurance. I think what we've heard this afternoon exemplifies where well-being fits in. And I suppose the key learning for us is at the beginning of paragraph 10 that your priority, one of your priorities, is support for the vulnerable, and the recognition that those who protect the public when they're vulnerable are themselves potentially vulnerable, and that the response to that offers the opportunity to become an even better organisation. So we find it actually a seriously impressive presentation, and wanted to bring that to your attention.
Well, thank you for that. It's a very strong endorsement by the independent ethics panel. So I note what you say in 1.11. So thank you very much for that. Okay, shall we go to JIAC then, which is 16, the assurance report. Steve, do you want to?
Thanks, Commissioner. There's a lot of stuff in there that I think it's useful for the public to be aware that we discuss and cover. The particular things I wanted to highlight is that we got the final report from the Head of Internal Audit with a satisfactory opinion. We're still keeping our eye on IT governance, although IT governance has improved significantly. We're now into the realms of looking at delivery of new systems, and indeed there's some meetings later this week that will take that forward. We've had another meeting since this report was constructed, and we're also looking at keenly at the force savings tracker. Again, in the meeting that we had last week, which this report doesn't cover, we had further information about the force savings tracker and how that's being dealt with. So we're quite comfortable with that as it's going on.
Okay, any comments on that? No questions. There's just one word, I think, in para 2. This is 1. Section 1, the second paragraph, third line down, where it says budget. I think that means grant, actually, isn't it? If there is a reduction in the grant, this will put pressure on PCCs.
Yeah.
Apart from that. Thank you very much for that. And we come to any other business. Is there any other business? Is there a VIU comment at all?
No comment as such. Do you have anything specifically that you want to know?
No, just in case you come in here with something in your mind and wanted to share it with us.
No, not specifically, no, Commissioner, thank you.
I think Linda's just got one she wants to raise.
Commissioner, just one if I may, and apologies for not raising it beforehand, it has only come through this morning. BT have published the call handling performance for 999s for November. Really pleased to say South Yorkshire have improved again. We're at 83.3% of answering our calls within the target time, which now places us 11th nationally, so that's a significant improvement from where we were earlier in the year. It's just important to share that with the public.
It's a big improvement from where we were in the past, so that is very good news. So thank you very much. Thank you. Anything else? Anyone? Any good and further good news to cheer us up at this?
Christmas is coming.
Christmas. Oh, it is coming. Okay, well, can I say thank you very much for the meeting and wish you well for Christmas and for the New Year if I don't see you again.
Set you up.
For good reasons.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.